A tall and evil shape, mounted upon a black horse. The rider was robed all in black, and black was his lofty helm. Yet this was no ringwraith, but a living man. His name is remembered in no tale, for he himself had forgotten it. A star shines upon the hour of our meeting, wherever you happen to be in Middle-earth. I'm glad you could join me today in my very first YouTube video, as we take a look at one of my all-time favorite Tolkien characters, the Mouth of Sauron. He served as lieutenant of the Dark Tower of Barad-dur, and was the emissary of the Dark Lord Sauron during the late Third Age and the War of the Ring. But who truly was he? Let's talk. Alright, so a quick disclaimer before we get going. Although I've read a lot of Tolkien, this is my first time I'm actually saying many of these words out loud, so I'll do my absolute best to pronounce everything the way Tolkien had intended when he was writing. If I happen to absolutely butcher a pronunciation, please let me know in the comments so I can fix that. And also, I'll leave links down below to all the artwork that I used in this video, so just check out the description for that. If you see your art and I forgot to credit you, please send me a message so I can credit you properly down below. Now, very little is known about the origins of the Mouth of Sauron. It is believed that he was one of the Black Numenoreans, the group of Numenoreans who were loyal to the ruling kings of Numenor, but who ultimately opposed the influence of the Valar in Numenor. After their loyalty and services during the War of Wrath, which saw the second downfall and imprisonment of the Dark Lord Morgoth, the remaining Edain were rewarded by the Valar with the island continent in the Western Sea, which was named Numenor, or in Quenya, Numenore, Westland. They finally arrived in 32 of the Second Age, led by Elros, the brother of Elrond, who assumed the royal scepter and became the first king of Numenor. The Numenoreans lived on their island in peace and became mighty and prosperous. They were the most advanced civilization of men that ever existed. Sauron knew of the strength of Numenor, and when he rose in the Far East, he knew that one day he would have to contend with the powers of the Island Kings. He knew, however, he would never be able to defeat their armies in open conflict, so he devised a new plan. Later on during the Second Age, Sauron, now under the guise of Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, allowed himself to be willingly captured by Ar-Pharazôn the Golden, the last king of Numenor, in 3262 of the Second Age. In possession of the One Ring, Sauron was successful in dominating the wills of a large group of Numenoreans, and convinced them to dissent from the friendship of the Valar. We even find out in the Akallabeth in the Silmarillion, that 3 of the 9 rings that were given to men were given to great lords of the Numenorian race. In Numenor, their old religions and practices were abandoned, and the worship of Morgoth had begun. In short, Sauron deceived many Numenoreans to turn them away from their ties with the Valar, and ultimately to turn against those they had once held in reverent fellowship. These Numenoreans came to be known as the King's Men, and would later become the Black Numenoreans we see in later tales. Now fully in the council of Ar-Pharazôn, he convinced him to break the ban of the Valar placed against the inhabitants of Numenor, and to amass a fleet and sail west to Aman, the Blessed Realm. This, of course, was a disaster for the Numenoreans. Once Ar-Pharazôn set foot on Aman, he and his entire navy were swept away by the divine intervention of Eru himself. Numenor was drowned. Aman and its surrounding isles, like Tol Eressëa, were removed from Arda, and the world was made round. This passage from the Akallabeth reads, "But the land of Aman and Eressëa of the Eldar were taken away, and removed beyond the reach of men forever. Only the select few elves that knew the special route to Aman would ever be able to reach those shores again." Now after the downfall of Numenor in 3319 of the Second Age, and its sinking into the sea, many of the remaining King's Men colonized the coasts and lands in the southern parts of Middle-earth. Most notable of these colonies was the settlement of Umbar, which was founded about 1,000 years prior in 2280. We later see Umbar reappear during the War of the Ring, as the Corsairs of Umbar sail north, assailing Pelargir en route to Harland, to aid the forces of Mordor during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. Now I've abridged much of this story, and these few topics alone could have entire lengthy videos dedicated to them in the future, but for the sake of this video, I believe that's enough information for you to know what exactly Black Numenoreans are, and where they came from. Back to the story. It is likely that the mouth of Sauron came from one of these colonies, sometime during the Third Age, although we don't know when or how old he was. It's told in the chapter The Black Gate Opens, in the book The Return of the King, that he entered the service of the Dark Tower when it first rose again. While we don't know how old the mouth of Sauron was, we know that the Dark Tower was rebuilt in 2942 of the Third Age, which, if he was born in that exact year, would make the mouth at least 77 years old. However, being of Numenorean descent like Aragorn, it is probable that he could have been far older than that. We know that he was deep in the Council of Sauron, and it was from him he learned great sorcery, and he was more cruel than any orc. It's also entirely possible that his life may have been unnaturally extended through Sauron's power, although that is complete speculation on my part, and there's no evidence anywhere that could point to that in any of the works that we currently have available. During the War of the Ring, there's still very little known about the Tower of Barad-dur's most vile servant. We know that by the time of the events of the Return of the King, that he has fully ascended the ranks of the armies of the Dark Tower, and now serves solely as one of Sauron's lieutenants and emissaries. It's said that he was one of the only servants of Sauron to speak with him directly during his reign in Barad-dur in the late Third Age. So long was he in service of the Dark Lord, spreading his evil words and deeds, that much like Gollum, when he was in possession of the One Ring, he too had even forgotten his own name. Another passage from the same chapter of The Return of the King says, "The lieutenant of the Tower of Barad-dur he was, and his name is remembered in no tale, for he himself had forgotten it." His entire soul at this point had been devoured by the domination of Sauron, and now he served only as a vessel of Sauron's malice. It's shown in both the books and the films that his mouth had become twisted and terrible, probably after years of spreading the black speech of Sauron. His words were so evil that his physical body began to crack under his corruption. The main part of his story comes when almost all hope of destroying the One Ring has been lost. Although the armies of Rohan and Gondor had defeated the armies of Mordor at Minas Tirith during the siege of Gondor and the subsequent Battle of the Pelennor Fields, almost their entire army had been wiped out. On the other side, we learn that Sauron has tens of thousands of more soldiers still waiting in Mordor to wipe away their remaining armies, and even more servants of the Dark Lord are being prepared to fight. In a last-ditch effort to distract Sauron, in an attempt to buy Frodo and Sam just a little bit more time to scale the slopes of Mount Doom and complete their mission, the remaining armies of the West, led by Aragorn, march on the Black Gate for a final confrontation. Greatly outnumbered, the armies of the West faced their doom as they arrived outside the Black Gate on March 25th, just 10 days after the victory at the Pelennor Fields on March 15th. As they arrived, the captains of the armies of the West unfurled their banners and blew upon their trumpets. "Come forth," they cried. "Let the Lord of the Black Land come forth. Justice shall be done upon him. For wrongfully he has made war upon Gondor and wrested its lands. Therefore, the King of Gondor demands that he should atone for his evils, and depart then forever. Come forth." After a long silence, the captains that had assembled began to turn away, when there came a loud beating and roaring of drums. The Black Gate began to open, and out came the dark embassy of Barad-dur, led by none other than the mouth of Sauron. He is described as a terrifying and hideous figure, riding atop a black horse, if it could even be called that. For the horse was huge and hideous, and in the sockets of its eyes and its nostrils there burned a flame. He rode out with a small company of soldiers and a single banner, bearing the flaming red eye, the evil eye of Sauron. He halted in front of the captains that assembled and began to speak. He demanded to speak with the leader of the host of the West, and, noticing Aragorn, he turned to him and decreed, "It takes more to make a king than a piece of elvish glass, or a rabble such as this." With no reply, Aragorn stared back at him, and the mouth recoiled as if struck by some blow. Gandalf then assured the herald that no emissary, even those beholden to the Dark Tower, would be harmed during the proceedings. With this, the mouth turned to Gandalf and offered to show him tokens that he was bidden to reveal. Among these tokens was the short sword that Sam had carried on his journey, one of the grey cloaks adorned with the elven brooch that they had been given in Lórien, And finally was the mithril coat that Frodo had worn. With this, despair fell upon the party. It seemed to them, in a moment of silence, that the world stood still, but their hearts were dead and their last hope gone. Finally, after the long silence, he opened his mouth once again to address the rest of the party, knowing now that the halfling had indeed been dear to them. He openly mocked Gandalf and his follies, claiming that it was even beyond his thought to believe that Gandalf would send the halfling into Mordor as a spy, so ill-equipped for the task. He assured him that the spies they captured would endure a slow torture in the Dark Tower for years to come. Now with this, Gandalf demanded the emissary name the terms for their release. And so he did. For their part in the opposition to his master Sauron, the realm of Gondor would forever withdraw back beyond the Anduin River, and would be required to take oaths of servitude and fealty to Mordor. East across the Anduin would be the lands of Sauron, henceforth and forever. All the lands from the Misty Mountains to the Gap of Rohan shall be free to govern themselves in the way they saw fit, but they would not be allowed to bear weapons ever again. And finally, they would aid in the rebuilding of Isengard, and it would be ruled by one of Sauron's lieutenants. Here, it's basically implied that the lieutenant that he had in mind would be himself, and he would serve as a tyrant of the West, and all those that lived in his dominion would become his slaves. It's worth briefly noting that it's doubtful that Sauron had any intention of respecting his side of the bargain, and allowing those in the West to live in peace under the rule of Sauron. It's doubtful that he would have killed them, but he would have had them serve as his slaves. To this, Gandalf noted and also stated that these demands were numerous for the return of a single spy. The mouth of Sauron laughed once again and said that he cared little if they agreed to the terms or not. These were the terms laid out by him, and they could take them or leave them. For the surety they craved, Sauron would never supply. With a bright flash, Gandalf seized the tokens from the foul messenger. These we will take in memory of our friend. And he rejected the terms outright. The laughter had fallen finally from the emissary of Sauron. He was filled with rage, and he could utter no more words. Only craven sounds came forth from his lips. Looking once more upon the deadly eyes of the captains of the West, he let out a final cry and galloped madly back to the gate, back to the Dark Tower, and was never heard from again. Now, in the films, he is famously ended by Aragorn and a single swing of Endril, the same blade that the mouth had mocked only moments earlier. In the book, it's a little different. After he passes back into Mordor, his fate following the downfall of Sauron is unknown, but it is likely that he perished alongside his master and most of the evil of the Third Age, as the Fourth Age of the world began. And there you have it. That is the brief story of the Mouth of Sauron, one of the book and film's most iconic character, given his short time in both. Now, as you can see, talking about Tolkien is a lot like taking apart one of those little Russian stacking dolls. I've got the name of them in front of me, but I'm not going to disrespect the language that much and attempt to say it, but I'll put a picture on the screen just so you all know what I'm talking about. When you start out with the mission of talking about one's soul and arguably very minor character, you end up branching off into topics that seemingly have nothing to do with the character, while at the same time being vital to explain their backstory. In this case, not only does the doll keep multiplying from within, it's multiplying horizontally and vertically and diagonally and all over the place, where you end up with a giant spiderweb of information that is loosely formed around a single idea or character. I have a good friend that I often speak about Tolkien with, and this is often the case of most of those conversations. We end up talking about something small and it expounds to levels where we both end up just getting lost in the spiderweb. I remember, for example, talking to him about Aragorn's ring that we see in The Lord of the Rings. As you know, it's the Ring of Barad-dur, but to explain that one seemingly minor object, you almost have to explain the entire history between elves and men spanning 3 ages of Middle-earth. And with that comes a seemingly never-ending branch of side stories. It's truly a testament to the professor's world-building, and the coherency of this world that he seemingly created out of nothing. You know, as I'm recording this outro, I'm realizing it's becoming longer and longer, so I'll try to keep this next part brief, and I assure you not every outro will be like this, but since this is my first video, I wanted to get this stuff sort of out of the way. When it came to making this channel to begin with, I had a lot of influences within the Tolkien YouTube community. A lot of content creators that I have personally taken inspiration from because I admire their love for Tolkien and how amazing their content is. Two of those creators that I'll briefly mention were Nerd of the Rings and The Philosopher's Games. Both of these creators are well versed in Tolkien way beyond my wildest imaginations, and it's obvious when you watch their content that they have nothing but pure passion for talking about Tolkien. So Matt from Nerd of the Rings is fantastic at making Tolkien lore videos clear and concise, almost like a lean cut of steak. He definitely has the knowledge and passion for Tolkien to make every single one of his videos hours long. That's just simply how much this guy knows about Tolkien. It's incredible, truly. Every time I watch a video, I'm amazed at how much he's able to fit into a 15-25 minute long video. I always leave feeling as though I blinked and the video was over, but he was able to cover so much content in that time. His videos are fantastic for my current lifestyle where I work a hectic 42+ hour a week schedule in retail with different hours every day. I'm able to throw on his latest video or go through his back catalog to a video I may have seen already but still need a quick refresher on. And I'm able to knock out a solid video during a lunch break or maybe while I'm driving in my car to work. Those are fantastic for me. On the other hand, we have another one of my favorite content creators, Chris from The Philosopher's Games, who I would say is more devoted to making long-form video essays, diving into every subject of Tolkien lore and really getting into the nitty and the gritty of it. His videos he did on Círdan are a perfect example of this. For many who have read the books and seen the films, Círdan is a fairly minor character. I put this in quotes when I say this because he is by no means irrelevant or unimportant to the story of The Lord of the Rings or the wider legendarium. But in terms of the books and the movies, he's given much less screen time and attention compared to someone like a Gandalf or a Frodo or even someone like Boromir, who is really only in the first film and then appears later in extended cuts of the later two. He's given so little screen time, in fact, that he only appears once, if I remember correctly, in the entire 9-hour-long film series, and it's really only in one scene, and he's given 0 lines. In fact, if you were sitting there watching the film with the cast list in one hand and a magnifying glass in the other hand, you wouldn't even know he's in the film. He's away in the background for the entire scene. I'll put a picture of it right here. Chris has a fantastic video on his channel, which I'll link below, covering every facet of Círdan's story in the greater Tolkien lore. I believe the video is about an hour and a half, and it thoroughly discusses his backstory while covering all the branches of backstory that go along with discussing a character such as him. He is in fact believed to be one of the oldest elves still alive by the end of the Third Age, and most certainly the oldest named elf. This just goes to show that there is so much to discuss about every Tolkien character, that even those characters relegated to minor amounts of screen time, that have hours and hours and pages beyond pages of lore to go along with them. So I suppose with that long sidebar out of the way, what I'm trying to say is that I'm still finding my footing and voice when it comes to Tolkien content creating on YouTube. I'm not sure if I'd like to make shorter videos that only discuss the basics, but are still informative and helpful to those people that just need their Tolkien fix that day, or if I'd like to explore making longer video essays, really diving into all the branches and facets of Tolkien lore. This video, for example, could have been 4 or 5 times longer. I cut out quite a bit because I felt like it was a bit unnecessary, but there may be people out there who would enjoy an hour-long video with that much backstory in it. I'd love your feedback and comments down below on what you guys would like to watch and maybe what you guys would like to see. Now, click off this video right now and go to their channels. I'll link them down below and I'll probably put links on the screen, so if you want to go watch them, I highly recommend it. And once again, I'd like to thank both of them for making incredible content the last couple of years on YouTube. It's really inspired me, and I'm sure it's inspired so many other people. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care and be good to each other.